chose this quote because when we think of the early modern period in England, I think we think of two things. That's Elizabeth I and William Shakespeare. And I think that shows how they both kind of achieved greatness. So for this class, we're obviously looking at Shakespeare, and I want to look at how Shakespeare kind of defined himself as great in this time and how he went about doing that. So what I'm going to do is look at his globe as the defining characteristic of the time period, and how there was essentially three main aspects of the globe that I want to look at, and that was the people that were in the globe, the business side of the globe, and its role in kind of early modern pageantry and theater as a whole with that. And we got to remember that it wasn't just, the books like we read Shakespeare today. In this time, going to a play, especially at the Globe, was an event, and it was a whole experience, not just the story. So we have to keep that in mind, and also we have to keep in mind the context in which Shakespeare was writing. So Shakespeare was writing in the Elizabethan period, and that's important for us because I think that really shaped who he was as a writer, obviously, but also a lot about what he wrote when you talk about civic pageantry and things like that, and things that he might do in order to gain favor or gain wealth, from the business side. So this was a time of great pageantry, and you're going to see that with some of the clips from plays even today, is that they were spectacles to be seen, and that they wanted to attract people to the Globe. So hope you enjoy the presentation today, hope you learned something from it, and without further ado, enjoy the show.
When the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger, stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood, disguise fair nature with hard-favoured rage. Now set the teeth, stretch the nostril wide, hold hard the breath, and bend up every spirit to his full height. The game's afoot. Follow your spirit, and upon this charge cry, God for Harry, England, and St. George!
So that was a commercial for Henry V that I saw this summer at the Globe, and it shows how exciting these plays were and how they really were there to attract people to come so that the theater company could then make money. And I think, we also have to think that theater then wasn't like theater now. Theater then was more like what we would call going to the movies. It was extremely popular. It was very lucrative for the top dogs like William Shakespeare. And these were running businesses, and they were powerful businesses. By the time Shakespeare retired, he went back to Stratford as one of the wealthiest men there. So we have to realize that he was running a business, and this was his livelihood, and that was his goal. It wasn't just these lofty things professors talk about. Even some of this business lingo survives today in our movies. We talk about something like the box office. That was literally the office where you ran your theater, and inside you had a box where you had your money that you got from your tickets, and that has stayed with us all the way till today. We also have things like a role in a movie or in a play, and that was because in the early modern period, people like Shakespeare, when they were writing roles, all your lines would be taped to a stick and then rolled up in a roll, and when you were handed your role for the play, that was the part you were going to play, and we still use that terminology today. Another very important thing to consider in Shakespeare's Globe was the class system and the range of classes that were there. There was nobles, there was commoners, there was the middle class, essentially a rising middle class in this time period, and you had them all in one building at once. And of course, Shakespeare and his company would travel to different courts and perform for different people, but he also had nobles come to the Globe, or at least extremely wealthy people in the Globe. And so you had the commoners in the pit, getting rained on if it was a wet day, and you had the wealthy sitting on their cushioned chairs. And I think one of the big things to realize is I think the Globe became such a popular symbol and such an important symbol for this time period in England because there was that varied class structure in there. It wasn't just a symbol of the nobility, it wasn't just a symbol of the commoners, but it was all of them, and it could represent all of the English population at once. And I think that's one of the reasons also theater in this time became such a popular part of society. And it wasn't just the people too. You also had the actors, who you're about to see the stage in a second, and this was kind of their theater. This was where they did their acting. And that's important because you see they were so close to the people that they were performing for that they had to play off them and interact with them even while they were playing their part. And that, I think, just created more and more of the atmosphere. The people there felt like they were connected, and it raised the popularity of playhouses like the Globe, and again has made them last as symbols. So in a second, you're going to see a preview for this play of Julius Caesar. They did, and I just had to take a quick second to say this was an amazing play. It was the most highly rated play in Britain in 2012, and it was Julius Caesar set in essentially Africa, or modern-day Africa, and based on tribal conflict, and it was just extremely well done. And I think it begins to hit on some of the pageantry that might have been shown in Shakespeare's time. So here you go.
The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones, so let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus hath told you Caesar was ambitious. If it were so, it was a grievous fault, and grievously hath Caesar answered it. Here, under leave of Brutus and the rest. For Brutus is an honorable man. So are they all honorable men. Come I.
I think that alludes to pageantry really well, because I think we can tell that with that clip there was clearly a message being sent. That was Mark Antony speaking in Julius Caesar right after Caesar's been murdered, and I think Shakespeare was definitely trying to convey a strong message with the words that were spoken there. And so I think that shows how he kind of participated in some of the royal and civic pageantry of the time. And I think he knew a lot that this was going on, that this different kind of pageantry, and that people were creating images of themselves. And I also think he did the same thing to help himself as a playwright. And I think he knew that if he both portrayed monarchs or nobility in positive lights, such as Henry V as this war hero, and also just playing on people's imaginations, getting people to be excited about his plays because he was being patriotic and talking about how great Britain was, or how much of a war hero someone was, or how clever someone was. And I think he made this relatable to people, or at least people desired to relate to these characters, and that was what made him so effective as a playwright. And not only as a playwright, but it's made him such a strong symbol of this time period, and will keep him as a strong symbol for probably the rest of conceivable history. I think, in conclusion, what I learned from this research or making this scrapbook is that when studying Shakespeare, I don't think we can take a singular approach of reading the words on the page and looking at what Shakespeare might have meant from that. But then when we're studying him, we need to look at it more well-rounded, that we need to say what was going on in the playhouse, what's going on in history, and I think that's done a lot in higher-level academia, but it's not done as much in high schools and in the classroom, even in lower-level college classes. And I think that we need to really examine the full spectrum there, because that's the way it was intended to be seen, and that's the way Shakespeare kind of intended it for it to be experienced. So without that, it's really just an incomplete education on the plays and on Shakespeare.